Hello and welcome to Shawn's Trains. Today we have an episode brought to you by Superior Scenics. This is a little technique they told me about while I was on the phone with them. Instead of using two pieces of cork, you use one piece of cork, and it helps the ballast fall a little bit more naturally like you would see on the track on a main line, especially something that's maybe a little bit more of a short line that's not as well maintained. And so what I'm going to do here is try that out myself. So we've got the cork, we've got some Pico coated E3 Flex Track, and we've got a small squeeze tube of liquid nails. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the cork to fit, get the Flex Track on there, test fit everything, make sure the culvert's not popping it up in the middle, and then we're going to glue it down and we're going to test it out. Alright, now that we've got everything kind of set up here, glue's drying, everything's setting, we should be in a pretty good place now that I can put all this stuff away, clean up a little bit. We'll let this set and come back to it later today, and I'll finish putting on the finishing touches, testing everything, and then I want to eventually add power feeders to this so that way I can put on locomotive headlights, etc. This may even become a programming track, but I'd like to be able to take it around the shows and whatnot to showcase models that I've been working with. Alright, so I'm working on adding some weathering to the track for this scene here, and what I'm going to do right now, I've got some paint kind of resting with some thinner in it, so I can kind of mix it up a little bit. I've already got shaken and stirred. I'm going to have shake and stirred a little bit more, but I want to talk about the application of weathering to this track. Now, for those of you who've been watching my channel before it was Shawn's Trains, when it was just Shawn Hoppert, I used to be bigger into Kato Unitrack, and I did the same sequence of weathering on some Unitrack to test it out, and it worked quite nicely. But now, because the track is separate from the ballast and everything else, I can be a little bit more thorough. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to stir this up a little bit more, shake it a little bit more, and I'm going to just apply it to the sides of the rails and to the ties, and that should give me a nice weathered, dirty effect. Just rusty, rail that's sitting there. I'm not shooting for a specific age or anything, but I want to get that down, and then we'll mix up the glue for the ballast. We'll get some soapy water, put the ballast down, put the soapy water on it, let it sit, and then we'll put the glue on. But for now, I just want to focus on getting the track weathered, and then after we get the ballast down, we'll weather the ballast, and then we'll do a small top dressing on a portion of this. So let's get this stuff stirred and shaken a little bit more here. Oh, put that on tighter than I thought. Okay. Make sure you set this down so it doesn't get on the table. Stir this up a little bit more. Make sure it's nice and agitated. So I'm kind of going off of the sides here. If I can see rust, it's not mixed in well enough. So I want to make sure I get that in there. I want all the brown that I mixed in this initially in there. So when I mixed this, I did 1/3, I think 1 part black, 2 parts rust of Tester's rust enamel. And why I did that was because when I did my test pieces on the Kato Unitrack, that's approximately what I had. And I really liked the way that turned out, so that's what I'm trying to duplicate here. So I don't want a ton on the brush. I just want to put it on the track like this, just on the tops of the ties and the sides of the rails. I'll get on the sides of the ties too, because those will be poking out of the ballast. But I don't want the brush just absolutely dripping. That is not the effect I'm going for. And then afterwards, what I'll do is, because it'll take a little bit to get all this done, as I'll go over with a second coat, because as this sits and dries, it'll begin to kind of take hold. And when you put your second layer on, it'll actually stick a little bit better. So I'm not going to bore you guys with all of this. I'll fast forward a little bit for you so you don't get stuck watching me in real time. Alright, so I did my first coat. I got the ties, I got both sides of the rail, I got everything that I needed to get with the brown. It's a little bit thinner than I would like, but I can always go back later and add another layer. I did actually I did 3 layers total. I also had the fan running when I had the video off, so make sure you have good ventilation. And then that'll help dry this too, and by the time I get back home tonight, this might be ready for another coat. And it'll be a little bit tackier, it'll hold a little bit more, but with that thinner on there, you can apply more coats, and that way you don't over apply right away. It gives you the opportunity to put in multiple coats. So if you want to do a certain part of the rail heavier than others, let's say you've got a dip in your railroad and it floods there from time to time, you can actually model that by, you know, weathering that area a little bit more, like swamp water or something, or dirtier water gets to that area more frequently. So that's it for now. Later on we'll come back, add another coat or two, and then we'll get to ballasting. Alright, so I've got the track painted, I've got everything glued down except for the ballast, and I have the water and glue in the bottles I'm going to use to do that. But first I want to pick up my ballast. So I've got a little box here from Superior Scenics with with a good variety of their different supplies that they have. So different grades of fine, ultra fine, and coarse, various rock. Most of this you might know as Pink Lady, but it's actually, I believe, Baraboo Quartzite. So we've got a few different sizes in here. We got a couple different kinds of stuff too. So that's just the Pink Lady. And then we've got the Black Lava Ultra Fine, Colorado Blend Ultra Fine, so it's really cool with the variety of sizes and everything that Superior Scenics has available. Is there's really whatever size you need, they've got you covered. I mean, look at this. This is insane. Look at all the different grades. So if you're doing N scale, H, O, O, G, S, everything. If you need boulders, if you need stone, they've got you covered. So what I'm going to do is try to figure out exactly what I want for ballast first, and then everything else after that. So anything I know I'm not going to consider for ballast, we're going to put it on the side here. And we're going to start with fine. So these are both ultra fine. This is very fine. This stuff we'll put on the side for the moment. This is some heavier Pink Lady. So you get fine, ultra fine, very fine, coarse, standard Pink Lady, and very fine again. So I know I'm probably not going to be using these guys for ballast. I'm probably going to be using very fine and ultra fine. And I've got a couple bags of each. So what I'm going to do first is I've got my single piece of cork here, so the ballast will fall a little bit more naturally. Let it fill in everything that it should on its own. I'm going to grab some paper towel, stick it under the ends, and then we're going to start dumping our ballast. Alright, well, I've got everything I think I need. I've got my soapy water, I've got my 50/50 Elmer's glue and warm water mix. I've got 2 containers here. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to pour the heavy ballast into the small jar and use that to apply it onto the tracks. After that, I'm going to pour in a little bit, like 1 part of fine, very fine, and 1 part ultra fine into here, and see how I like the look, the texture, and the feel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that to kind of go over the top and kind of spread it out a little bit. So one thing a lot of people do at their model railroads, and I'm not knocking it, but they make it look perfect. And let me tell you, after talking to Dave at Superior Scenics, it really sunk into me. It's never perfect. It gets rattled into place, it falls down slopes, it gets poured unevenly. I mean, it's just a car going by that's dumping this stuff. No one's sitting there scooping it to shape the landscape. So that's something I really want to apply to this. And then later on, I'm going to pick out another kind of ballast or another color. I'm going to do a top dressing. So I've already got stuff when I had my Unitrack layout. I've already got kind of some weathering stuff with some India ink and water mixes that I'm going to use for weathering the ballast once it's down. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to cut a snippet off this, fill this jar about half full, and I'm going to start pouring it and see if it falls the way I want it to. And then we'll fill in around that with the mixture of the two, because in the soft stuff here, the ultrafine, will fill in some of the gaps and give us a more full and satisfying look. At least that's the plan. So let's give it a shot. You can actually see some of the dust coming up from this stuff being moved around in the package so much. It's kind of cool because it lets you know it's actual stone. And it smells like real stone. So you get that effect too. So I'm going to start not at the edge, but I want to start probably about 1 or 2 in and kind of slowly work my way across. Alright, so that little bit went a lot further than I thought it would. It doesn't take much of this to go a long ways. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear out in between the rails, and I'm just going to kind of move it around and let it push out. I'm not going to try to shape the sides of this or anything. I'm just trying to make sure I clear the ballast out from in between so it's not overflowing. If I just get to the culvert, I'll be happy. So I'm actually going to go grab a small paintbrush, and that'll help me kind of clear some of this through and give it actually a better look. So I couldn't really pick out which one I wanted to use the best, so we're just going to try with something kind of medium and go from there. And again, I'm just trying to clear it out from in between the rails. I'm not really trying to shape it or form it. Now I'm just clearing off the tops of the ties because I figure it'll eventually shake off from use. I gotta remember not to tamp it down. If it's somewhere and it just falls kind of odd, I gotta leave it alone because it's got trying to let it fall naturally. So I'm pretty happy with the way that turned out so far. I don't feel like it's too uneven. It's falling just the way it's supposed to. So I'm going to fill up the jar a little bit more. I'm going to do the rest, and then when I get back to mixing it, we'll go back to standard footage. But for right now, I'm going to let you guys fast forward through this. Alright, so I've gone through and I've spread everything out, I think as good as about as I'm going to get. So what I want to do now is kind of create some sort of natural moving, rolling effect with the ballast. So what I'm going to do is just gently tap it. I'm going to move it onto a flat surface first, but just to kind of give it the effect of time, trains going over it, help it settle a little bit more naturally than I'll be able to by brushing it. So this looks pretty good. I'm very happy with this. I've got a spot over here where I'm missing a little bit, so what I might do is fill in just a little bit over here. There's actually a couple of spots. So instead of just going with the straight up fine, I'm going to put in some ultra fine and do maybe a half a jar of each into this larger jar. And I'm going to mix that up and we're going to see what we get. And that'll be what we touch it up with. A little bit of dust. So that'll be something to take note of if you're doing this at home in the basement or something. Turn on a fan because there's a little bit of dust. I mean, this is a natural product. So we're just going to go through, add some to the top here, especially where it's maybe showing that it's getting washed away or something. Just around the edges. Just give it a little bit of a fine touch. So there's a little bit more fine on that than I cared for. I must have had a nice pocket going in there. But every time we move it and mix it, it changes up. And if you sit there and shake it long enough, I'm sure it'll mix up just the way we want. So with that, we're going to go through maybe with a little bit softer brush, and we're going to just brush off the tops of the rails again. We don't want that fresh poured look, we want that kind of worn look. Pretty happy with the way this is turning out. I'm just doing one last little pass. We're going to tap around it a little bit. I don't know if this actually does anything, but it makes me feel a little better, so maybe a little placebo effect. Just kind of knock everything down, let it kind of settle naturally. Now the only thing I haven't decided is if I want to put a pile of ballast on each end, because this is a display module, and this is kind of ugly. So if I put a chunk at each end, that's not the end of the world, but it does limit the size of the locomotive I have on here, and from ever using this. I could just leave this clean on each end, and I could attach track to it at a later point. Not that I'm worried about it. This is the main concern. But from here, we have our 50... just a few drops, so I probably put more than a couple of drops in there. There's still some settling on the bottom. But this is just some cheap dish soap and warm water. And what we're going to do is pour this gently over the ballast, just a little drop at a time, and let it just kind of soak in. So when we put the glue and water mix on, it's going to go through even better. So what this does is make water wetter. Okay, now that I can smell Dawn dish soap throughout the basement, I can tell because I've been smelling it for a couple of minutes now. We're ready for our water and glue mix. So this is just regular Elmer's glue in the school supply section at Meijer's or wherever your local store is. Office supplies, whatever. You could probably find this just about anywhere, including the dollar store. I just use Elmer's glue because that's what they had, and I grabbed that because I'm used to it. What I did before is I poured out an entire bottle of glue into warm water, stirred it up real good, and added a little extra hot water to it, and then poured it back in here because there's always the residual. And then I shook it up really good in here. It's not warm anymore, but it should achieve what we're looking for. So I'm going to start the same way I did with the soapy water. Is I'm going to start from this side, go right down the middle, come back this way, and then right back around. And I don't know if you can apply too much. I mean, it's already watered down, it dries clear, and we're going to apply some weathering to this afterwards anyways. So I'm not too worried about it. So that was our 50-50 water mixture, soap with a couple of, or water with a few drops of soap in it. You can see how much the bubbles came through. And then we use Superior Scenics ultra fine and very fine ballast. And we mixed it up, poured it on here so it had a nice natural look to it. We didn't sit here and groom everything. I just tried to get it off the tops of the ties. Now, the hard part, waiting. So when we come back, I'll have to scrape all the paint and debris off the tops of the rails, and I'm going to put on a couple of wire feeders on the end with the rail joiners, and we're going to see if we can fire up a locomotive. This is going to be my new display for doing videos and reviews. Another thing we'll do is after the glue dries, we'll have to clean off any ballast that might be in between the flangeways there, and that way we don't have any issues. So, hang tight. So I've got kind of the effect that I'm looking for with this ballast. I'm pretty happy with it overall, but after having taken a closer inspection, I can see some areas where I'm actually lacking a little bit, like right here. So I think I'm going to touch that up a little bit, add a little bit more ballast in a couple spots. I'll add a little bit more soapy water and glue, and then let that dry, and then I'll begin using the wash to add some color and texture to the ballast. After that, I'll see about doing a top dressing. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is move these rail joiners here at the end, and then I'll put on some power feeders, clean the top of the rail off, and we should be ready to go to put on a locomotive for test. Alright, so you can see where I've started testing with the coloration of the ballast a little bit with some India ink here in water. And so I'm going to slowly work my way all the way down, and that'll give it time to dry. And all we're doing is adding some color, and it's going to add some definition to the ballast here. You can see inside the rail there. It's going to give it a little bit more of a weathered look, a little bit more of a time and age look. And the more you add, the more color it's going to get. So I'm going to add a little bit more between the rails, and I'm just going to get all the ballast on both sides here. So stick around, and let's get this done. So I want to show you guys just how I'm spreading this, because it is going to be a little bit of a time-consuming process, but I'm literally just taking and dragging the brush along the ballast here. So you're going to have to kind of work it in and play with it a little bit. It's alright if it gets on the track, because we're just going to make this dirtier anyways, and the more we add to the middle, the darker it'll get. So you want to make sure that you add it and apply it kind of evenly to the spots, so you don't get really dirty spots, unless that's what you're looking for, is specifically dirty spots. Well, make sure you get in between the rails, or in between the ties, pardon me. But you definitely want to get in here where all that grease and grime and all the nasty stuff from those dirty, nasty engines and trucks are going to drop and fall. Or steam engines. If you've got steam and that's your thing, God bless your heart, because they're beautiful. But they are dirty. And I don't know about you guys, but I lube the living heck out of my locomotives. And so mine definitely are taken care of. I'm really going to make sure that I get in between here. I really want to reflect how much this track is used. And I can go around on the outside. And if you want to be a little bit more consistent without having to do extra passes and kind of watching what you're doing, you could use a wider brush. That'll get more. But I kind of want to focus mine a little bit because I really want it to stick in certain areas. And I'm getting a pretty good effect here. Even if I'm not that good at this, I don't care. I'm having fun. That's what matters. To me anyways. If you guys learn something and you guys can make something work for you, that's a great bonus. And that's what I would love. But if it doesn't work out that way, well, gosh darn it, at least I'm having fun. And hopefully you guys are having a good time watching me. Maybe you can apply some of this on your layout. That's what I'm hoping. So it's taking a few passes to get this just the way I want it. And that's alright, because I've got more time. So after I've done this and this is dried, I'm going to go back and do what's called top dressing eventually. And all that is adding a fresh layer of ballast over old ballast. And it'll be noticeable in some spots especially. And that's just to kind of show that, you know, that the railroad's been maintained, taken care of to some degree. Add some more right down the middle. Oh boy. Spill, spill, spill. Well, thank goodness. This is diluted several times and it comes right out. But now I gotta play it safe because I done made a boo-boo. So because this is diluted, if you don't want it really thick and heavy in certain spots, you're going to have to do it yourself and continually add more and hope it doesn't spread out too much. I don't think I even got this stuff down here. So I'm pretty happy with the way this side is turning out right now. I'm going to start working my way over. Alright, so now we've got all the India ink down just the way I want it for the moment. As it dries, it may darken, it may lighten, but we'll see how the effect on the ties and the ballast is. When I did this previously, it worked very well on Cato Unitrack, which had a flat surface that was kind of bumpy in spots, whereas this is very porous. It goes straight through. It's like it's filtering the ink as it goes down almost. It can just pour all the way through. It doesn't have to sit in one spot. So it may be lighter, it may be darker, I'm not sure. Maybe it's going to be exactly how I see it, which is, if that's the case, I'm very happy with it. I might go through and darken a little bit more in the middle or along the sides on the ties there. But for the most part, I'm very happy. So the next thing I'm going to do after that dries is start doing the scenery around, add a couple trees maybe. I don't want to put too much on here just because this is going to be used for photography. So if I do trees, it's going to be on one side of the lake. I've got a couple of trucks, some boats, some campers, stuff like that. So the next time, I suppose in the next part of the video, I'm going to have a bunch of scenery supplies over here and we're going to start plotting out what this might look like. We're going to take a couple of reference photos so as I pull everything off, I know where it goes back. We're going to put some more weeds. We're going to see if we can get some color on the ends of these cattails here and go from there. Alright, so wrapping this up, we've installed the track with one piece of cork, not two. We weathered the track by painting it with a mix of brown and rust, or black and rust, pardon me. And we applied our Pink Lady ballast from Superior Scenics. We weathered that with some India ink and water. We let it dry, and it looks pretty good. I'm very happy with the finished product. For now, this is going to be it. We're just wrapping up this video. Next time, I'll do another video about adding details around and about ballasting the ends or adding bumpers or whatever I end up doing. But this is it. I hope you guys like what you see. I hope you like what you learned, if you learned anything. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care.